Hello and welcome to Phuket PALS GED Live. Today we're going to have another video where we discuss 10 GED social studies questions, explain them, and talk about how we can come to the right answer. So, as always, please pause the video whenever you'd like or when mentioned, and that will give you time to read texts, look at graphs, charts, or maps, or other infographics, and come to your own determination of what's the correct answer before we discuss it. So let's dive right in. So here we have a typical drag and drop question. We've talked about the different types of questions in other videos. So this one says, drag and drop the colonial regions that match the economic activities below. Looking here, we have 3 columns above and 1 beneath. The top left is telling us a list of cash crops, tobacco, rice, and cotton. The center column is an ocean-based economy, shipbuilding, trade, and fishing. And on the far right, we have staples, such as wheat, barley, and rye. Beneath that, we have a column giving us the colonial regions. The colonial regions, as you should have studied in the U.S. history segment of the test prep, would be New England, the middle colonies, or the southern. We're not going to go into which colonies are in each region, but we can make a determination which region had which type of economy based on our factual based knowledge. So this question requires you to have done your studying of the history portion, particularly colonial history. And if you have done that, even briefly, you should be able to answer this quite easily. These type of questions are great. We can do this really quick. So go ahead, pause the video, give it some thought, and decide which region had which type of economy. Alright, let's have a look at the answers. So the southern economy was based on cash crops, tobacco, rice, and cotton, and their labor was primarily sourced from the African slave trade. The middle, ocean-based economy was in New England. This is because they had the most plentiful resources for forests, which produced wood, and there were lots of fish in the water surrounding New England. And then the staple crops were what the colonists grew for their consumption so that they could live and have enough food through the winter, were wheat, barley, and rye, and those were in the middle colonies. And so I've been taking these questions from a great book that's Test Prep. These are questions used to help us guide ourselves through the process directly after the reading. So if you just read about New England in a brief history, then you could then use that factual-based knowledge to answer these questions. And this book has this great section for many questions about here's how to crack it. So it tells us that we can use the details given in the question and then the information you already know about the colonial regions to make a decision based on which economic activity is appropriate. So basically what this tells us, though, is a little bit more explained details about each region and what they grew. But there's no real way around it. You have to remember the information. Some tricks they're mentioning is that you could remember that cash crops required heavy field work, and we know that slavery was only as most prevalent in the South, so that tobacco, etc., which require a lot of labor, must be in the South. And then, if we know that the northern colonies were in the North Atlantic, where there is a climate that would not be suitable for farming, it's too cold, they're most likely going to engage in other activities. Alright, moving on. Here we have an article or poster. I'm not sure what this is, the cover to something, or it could just be a poster to convince people, an advertisement in a newspaper. They don't tell us. At the bottom of it, it says, title page, Nova Britannica, offering most excellent fruits by planting in Virginia, exciting all such as well affected to further the same. This is in old language. We don't speak like this anymore. If you're studying for the GED, you probably don't really know what they mean too much, but we can get the gist of it, and we can make inferences to decide what this is all about. So we have some key information that can help us answer these questions right on the advertisement, I'm assuming, advertisement itself. So beneath the ship, we have the word London. We have a ship, we have the word fruit, We also have Virginia mentioned in the top. So these can all help us understand it a little better. So question 1 asks, this document was most likely created with the intention to, and we have 4 options. Go ahead, pause the video and read and decide which one you think is best. So, hope you've had a chance to give it some thought. A says sell fruit. B, recruit colonists. C, praise the bravery of seafarers. Or D, raise funds for shipbuilding. Well, luckily, if you come across a question like this, we can use the process of elimination to eliminate some of these answers which don't make much sense. So, starting with A, this seems quite likely because we've used positive adjectives like excellent, and we have the word fruit right there. We have a picture of a ship, so we can assume that trade could be a likely topic for this advertisement or poster. B says recruit colonists. Well, though this could make some sense because we could use a ship to bring colonists across the Atlantic and we could entice them with the offer of excellent fruit. It doesn't mention the word colonists or recruitment in any way. Then we have C, praise the bravery of seafarers. I would say that you could cross this off right away. Although there is a ship, each answer, C and D, contains a reference to the sea or ships. None of the other text on this advertisement make any sense when you consider bravery of seafarers or shipbuilding. So C, praise for the bravery of seafarers, doesn't have any mention of that. It doesn't make much sense. We can cross that off. D, raise funds for shipbuilding. If you were trying to raise funds, you would request or solicit funds in some way. None of the text does this, so D is off. Leaving A and B, since fruit is mentioned, we're just going to go ahead and say that fruit is the most likely. It's directly mentioned in the document. Number 2 is a drag and drop question. It says, this document was meant to be read by people in A, London, England, B, a New England colony, C, Jamestown, Virginia, or D, a shipbuilding yard. Apologies. So let's go through each of these, but first pause the screen, have a look, see which one you think is correct. Okay, so again, it's easiest to just look at these primary sources and try to find text that helps us make the best choice. So right beneath the ship we mentioned, it says London. On the top, it says Virginia. So we have 2 pieces of evidence which could give us the right answer. We have to think about this. If we're trying to sell fruit from Virginia, where would that most likely be sold? So, was it meant to be read by people who were in a New England colony? Possible. Jamestown, Virginia? Highly unlikely. We're producing the fruit in Virginia, and then we have a ship which indicates that we are transferring it, so Virginia is not going to be the place you build it. Why would you need a ship to buy fruit locally? A shipbuilding yard? That doesn't seem to have any sort of correlation to the primary source either. So what's more likely? A New England colony? Okay, you could ship fruit from Virginia there, or London, England. Well, we've got this word London right underneath it, which is where it was printed. London is the best choice. Okay, here we have a timeline talking about different events in pre-revolutionary colonial history. The question asks us, which of the following inferences can be made based on the timeline above? So inferences and making inferences is a valuable skill for the GED test. Please make sure you practice this. Inferences are coming to conclusions based on some rational line of thought or observations from what's presented to you. So what kind of conclusion can we draw based on this timeline? Well, let's have a look at the timeline. Pause the video, look at it yourself. I'm just going to go through it right away. So we have from 1765 to 1774. We've got the Stamp Act, which taxed printed products. And we've got the boycott of British products the next year, the same year. The next year we have the Stamp Act being repealed or removed, cancelled. In 1767 we have the Townshend Acts, taxed lead, paint, paper, and tea. And this was followed by, in 1773, the monopoly of tea from a British company. That would be, if you can guess which company it is, extra bonus points for you, and that means you are on top of your colonial history. Which company would it be? It would be the British East India Company. And that same year, in 1773, the Boston colonists, the Sons of Liberty, threw the Boston Tea Party. The following year, in 1777, we have the coercive acts if you're in Britain, or the intolerable acts if you are a colonist, which punish colonists. So which of the following inferences can be made based on this timeline? A. The colonists' boycott of British goods had a significant impact. B. The Boston Tea Party resulted in a monopoly on tea. C. The coercive or intolerable acts punished the colonists harshly. Or D. Stamps were an expensive product. So pause the video, have a look at this, read how to crack it. Pause the video here, read this. Go ahead, you can pause the video here and read the answers again. Let's talk about what they say and how to crack it and see what information they use to eliminate answers. So let's just go right to A. So it says you can point to the fact that the Stamp Act was repealed or taken back after the boycott of British goods. So this is telling us that the colonist boycott, was a sufficient enough impact for the British to reverse their decision. So A could be correct. B, because the Boston Tea Party comes after the British monopoly on tea, this is not possible, right? So the Boston Tea Party did not result in a monopoly on tea. The Boston Tea Party was the result of the monopoly on tea. B is not possible. Watch out for these tricky wordings in the sentences and questions. These are meant to make sure you truly understand the material. C, so this says harsh, but we have no indication of how harsh they were in that top right box. It just says what they did. They punished them. Harsh is also a subjective term, and that's not very easy to pin down. D, stamps were an expensive product. What does it say here? Stamp Act has nothing to do with the price of stamps. So we're not going to speculate, as they say. We're not going to make judgments about the price. So it doesn't make sense. There's no evidence in the timeline to support it. So A is the best answer for this, because the others we can eliminate due to subjectivity or being factually inaccurate. Next, we've got a map about whatever it could be. It's from the 1800s. And we're supposed to draw a conclusion about what these shaded areas would most likely indicate. So I hope that you've been studying westward expansion. Westward expansion is a brief but important part of the U.S. history portion of the GED exam. And the year 1800s tells us when what this would most likely be about. The 1800s were a time of rapid expansion in the U.S., Lewis and Clark expeditions, the Transcontinental Railroad, and new means of moving people across the country. We're trying to take over the western part of the country from the native people who lived there, or Indians as they're called in the text, and exerting our manifest destiny. So it says the shaded areas of this map from the late 1800s most likely indicate what? A, pathways of the Underground Railroad. B, land grants provided to railway companies. C, Major rivers used for transporting manufactured goods. D, the Lewis and Clark Trail. So I'm going to go through these in reverse order since that's the easiest way to eliminate them. There's going to be a how to crack it. I'll put that up on the screen and let you pause to watch it, but I'm just going to go through it on my own because we're going to all be doing this as we take the test. We need to practice trying on our own. So D, the Lewis and Clark Trail. The Lewis and Clark Trail was a single trail that went from about the center of the western United States to the northwest. There are many shaded areas that are outside of the area of the Lewis and Clark Trail. That can be eliminated. C, major rivers used for transporting manufactured goods. The biggest river in the United States, the Mississippi, runs from north to south, and there is no clear indication of that river, so we can rule out that it wasn't the major rivers. These run in the opposite. Most of these run in the opposite direction of the biggest river in the U.S. B, land grants provided to railway companies. Those do look like some of the major areas. We can see that in the center eastern portion of the United States, we have a lot of areas where you would need land to bring cattle back for the newly emerged industrial revolution's cattle processing plants. We also have several east to west, west to east corridors where you could have a railroad that brings products to and from the most populated and the newly settled areas. This makes a lot of sense. A, pathways of the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad, if we've studied the Civil War and the time of U.S. history afterward, these would be traveling from the south where the slavery was most concentrated to escape to the north and to Canada. That doesn't make sense. Most of these shaded portions are in the opposite part of the country. So B is the best answer for this. Here's how to crack it again. You can read through this if you want. Go ahead and pause the screen. In the interest of keeping this video short, we're going to move on. Here we have a passage. Go ahead and pause the video and read this passage. Okay, so this is written by O'Sullivan and it says, click on the description that does not correspond with O'Sullivan's view of the American nation presented in the passage above. You can go ahead and pause the video and read all 4 of these and decide which one you think is not linked to O'Sullivan's view. Keep a careful eye on these not or except. Those big bold words are meant to make it so that you don't miss the meaning. So, the first one on the left, American democracy is oriented toward the future. If we look back in the text, we can find the beginning of a new history. It says, less with antiquity, little connection to the past history. This tells us that we are looking towards the future. American democracy is oriented toward the future, according to the text. That makes sense. The American people are a nation of immigrants. Can we find information in the text to correlate with that? Right in the first sentence, the American people have derived their origin from many other nations. So that makes sense. That's part of the text. That's part of the idea and views expressed in the text. The greatness of the U.S. is its connection to the past. The third box from the left. And so if we look here, it says, we have in reality but little connection with the past history of any of them. So there's no connection or little connection to the past. This is not represented in the text. Let's see if the last one is not also, or is it? Equality is a founding principle in the country. Well, if we look right up into the second sentence, it's a run-on sentence, the first sentence, being entirely based on the great principle of human equality. So that is one of the ideas espoused in the text. So the greatness of the U.S. is its connection to the past is not corresponding to O'Sullivan's views. So we can use this process of elimination to find the correct answer. But remember, we have about a minute and a half, a minute and 45 seconds per question, including the reading or looking at the information on maps, graphs, charts. So we need to be able to do this fast. Okay, moving on to the next one. According to the passage, which of the following describes the destiny of the United States? So if you've read that passage already, I'm going to give you a chance. Here you go. Pause the screen, read it again. Now you could pause the screen and read these answers, A, B, C, D. So the U.S. will follow the same path of development as other nations. B, the U.S. will establish superior economic system. C, the U.S. will grow into a vast empire. Or D, the U.S. will develop a new history of democracy. So the passage tells us that A, the U.S. will not follow the same path as other nations. So A is not correct. Although we do believe that the colonists, the new Americans thought the U.S. will establish a superior economic system, that is not mentioned. So B is not correct. C, the U.S. will grow into a vast empire. And nowhere in this text do they mention the word empire. So we can decide that that does not make sense either. So D, the U.S. will develop a new history of democracy. This is the best answer. And if we look at the text again, we can find that the formation and progress of an untried political system, which separates us from the past and connects us with the future, regards the entire development of the natural rights of men. These are all new democratic ideals. So D is the correct answer. Okay, next question is a drag and drop question. We can't do that here because we have JPEGs, but I've drawn some messy underlining on the next slide for you. So it says, drag and drop the contrasting features of the North and the South into the appropriate boxes. So this would be related to U.S. history, particularly talking about the Civil War. Make sure you study that U.S. history thoroughly the first time and then review before the test. So we have the North on the left, South on the right. On the bottom we've got 6 boxes talking about different types of labor, development, and population. Go ahead, pause the video, decide which of those boxes in the bottom fit the North and which fit the South, and then let's talk about it. Okay, I hope you've had a chance to look it over. If we look at this slide, we can see that the North had most of its labor provided by immigrants. New York was an entry point from Europe, so immigrant labor was what fueled most of the industrial activity in the North. The North was not suitable for cash crops, so during the Industrial Revolution they started to produce factories. Because of immigration being so frequent and heavy to the North, they also had a higher population. So the population was 22 million. The South maintained its agricultural cash crop economy. The population was about 9 million, which was more than the past, but was not growing as fast as the North, and they still relied on slave labor. These two different economies and different sources of labor were a big source of contention and led to the American Civil War. All right, moving on, we got a new topic in U.S. history. This would be a poster used to convince the U.S. public to act in a certain way during the First World War. Pause the video, have a look at the poster, and then let's decide which answer on the left makes the most sense. Okay, so the poster is telling us it's got pictures of food. It's by the U.S. Food Administration, which must be the precursor to the Food and Drug Administration. And on the top it tells us, eat more in bold. Eat more corn, oats, rye, fish, poultry products, vegetables, potatoes, baked and boiled and broiled foods. Eat less wheat, meat, sugar, and fats. These eat less would be foods that are easily stored and kept and contain large amounts of calories. And it says at the bottom, to save for the army and our allies. So we need those soldiers in our army and our allies in Europe to have lots of calories that they can transport easily. The purpose of this poster was to encourage people in the US to do what? Drag and drop question, the first option being ration a limited supply. Next one, buy more US produce. Next one is get fit to join the army. And the last one, save money. So the US Food Administration probably isn't going to convince us to save money. They don't really care about our savings. And another thing about savings, or there's no imagery of money or currency to indicate that would make sense. Save money's out. Get fit to join the US Army. Again, although eating healthy would help you, there's no mention of exercise, there's no mention of the US Army, and there's no Uncle Sam pointing at you saying, I want you. Buy more US produce. Okay, well they are asking us to eat more produce, but there's no mention of purchasing. So there's no mention of where the produce comes from in this either. So the best answer would be to ration a limited supply. So if they're telling us to eat more of something and eat less of something, that means they want to save or ration what we have less of. Ration a limited supply makes the most sense. Again, you want to do this in a minute. You want to be able to look at this picture in 1 minute and then guess the correct answer, deduce the correct answer within that 30 seconds to 45 seconds. And here we have another how to crack it. They tell us about the connections between action and effect, eating less, eating more. This is to save for our allies. If we save, it means that we are restricting, which is telling us there's a limited supply. And you may already know what rationing is. Again, at the bottom, it tells us it doesn't say anything about the US market or fitness or money, and it just implies that we're helping our allies and managing the food for the war effort. Okay, last two questions for today's video. We have a table at the top which says the causes of World War I. We have 4 causes: militarism, nationalism, alliances, and imperialism. All of these were causes of World War I. It says click on the cause of World War I that is described in the events below. Pause the video, read those 2 events, and then decide which cause best suits each. Alright, I hope you had a chance to look at this and give it some thought. Number 1 says the rivalry between Britain and Germany intensified when they competed for claims to land in northern Africa. There was a rivalry between the European powers at the time, and this was a legacy of imperialism. We can deduce that this is related to imperialism because these lands they're competing for are in northern Africa, lands outside of the mother country. Lands outside of the mother country would be colonies or imperial territories, so that makes the most sense. There's also no mention of alliances, as Britain and Germany are rivals. Though nationalism could play a part, again, imperialism just makes more sense. The same with militarism. 2. Russia entered World War II in defense of Serbia after Austria-Hungary declared war. So, militarism, not mentioned. There's no mention of arms build-up, troop increases, etc. Nationalism. Nationalism could make sense, but there are other options that make more sense. Alliances. So, in defense of Serbia, and after Austria-Hungary declared war, imply that there is an alliance, an agreement to defend each other, or defend other nations nearby. And we have the indicator that the cause for this defense was a declaration of war. Alliances so far is looking like a great answer. Then if we look at imperialism, well, we've already used imperialism, so it's not that likely. And also, there's no mention of territories, colonies, or actually the fact that Russia was not really, or Serbia, were not really part of the European colonial expansion. So, alliances makes the most sense and is the correct answer for 2. That's it for today's video. I just want to let you know that you can pass the GED. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So be confident, be decisive, be prepared, and good luck.